Good afternoon, everyone. My name is MJ Akande. I'm the Events and Marketing Coordinator at Recreation Manitoba. I'd like to welcome you today to the free asset management webinar that we have going on with MyMac. Today, we will be hearing from John Tarantino, and go on. I just have a few housekeeping rules, and I will introduce to Mark. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that Recreation Manitoba is located on the indigenous, the Anishinaabe, Cree, and Oji Cree and Dennis people. We respect the treaties that were made on this land and acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous community in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Once again, Recreation Manitoba welcomes you to today's webinar. If you have any questions, please make use of the chat box. And if you have any technical difficulties, please message me and I will be able to help you solve that. And I will pass it over to John.
Thanks, MJ, and thank you, folks. And I think, MJ, if folks want to ask questions, I think they should be allowed to just unmute themselves and feel free to ask questions, and we'll answer them as precisely as we possibly can. So, to begin with, we're grateful for the opportunity that we have to partner with the association. And what I'd like to do is just the first couple of minutes give you a sense of the RFAM product, the relationships, the partnerships, because I think that then also leads into what we've done, right? So what I'd like to mention is that the RFAM product evolved about 4 years ago with the Ontario Recreation Association and the Ontario Good Roads. And so what they wanted to do was bring technology to their members and help them to collect data with regards to asset management. If you folks are interested at your own leisure, there's the website rfam.ca. Feel free to reach out onto that site and to review it, and feel free to get back to us with comments. One of I think the important thing is that the application has been built in partnership to add value to not only the association partners, but also to the individual client that uses it. Here's the benefit and the value. What we've been able to do is establish this relationship across Canada with the associations. They make the component of the inventory portion available to their members at no cost. The value is that the association at the end of the year and so on can review aggregate data. That will help them to understand what kind of courses they should provide, what kind of training is needed, and so on. To the individual user, what it does is it helps you to standardize and collect your data in a fashion that is consistent right across Canada. So not only do we have Canadian associations, but we're now also starting to work in the US with the US Ice Rink and with the Colorado Association as well. So that's a place for you to look at and to review the RFAM product. If any of you are interested in knowing who MyMac is and so on, again, we have a website, marmac.ca, and this will show you our participation, our involvement with municipalities across Canada with regards to asset management. That having been said, we'll drill right in and we'll talk about the RFAM product from an asset management perspective. And we can share information with you right across Canada as to what the various provinces are trying to do and what they're trying to achieve. The application itself is a hosted site, so we will provide you with a link to that site. We will set up your area with the name of your municipality or organization, and then allow you to create a variety of users through our system admin module so that anybody can have access to your data internally. You don't install anything on your computers. There's no software installation. There's none of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a process. And as I said, if anywhere there's questions that you'd like to ask, feel free and we'll answer those questions right away for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to log in as a simple user, log in, password, agree to the terms, hit the login button. And what we've done here is we've created a demo site that shows you how the data can be captured and how it can be manipulated and so on. A couple of quick things from a technology perspective. So from a technology perspective, the forms that you see here are consistent. Once the user understands how to capture the data, then the forms are similar all the way through. These are some of the various tabs that can be turned on and turned off. The add button pops up the form that allows you to input data. Now, a lot of this presentation will revolve around how does this help you from an asset management perspective. So when we begin, the input form allows you to start to structure your data. So is this piece of equipment or is this component part of a park or a facility or a trail? What are the various components in that facility? And again, these are drop-downs that have already been standardized. So by clicking on those buttons and selecting the current status of that asset, you hit the Save button and that information appears here. This is the only mandatory data that needs to be collected. From this point, we then move in and we start collecting data. So the way the application is structured is you begin with a building. Within that building, you drill down into a room. And within that room, then you drill down to your capital assets. So that's the structure. So there's a 3-level tier to it. This is the building that we have. We're now going to drill into that particular building. The geometry is all about the high-level information. What's the square area of the building? What are the dimensions of the buildings? What are the components that make up that building? Again, from an asset management perspective, information such as the year that it was built, or the number of square meters that the rink may be, or the number of HVAC units. Those are all key components that will help in your asset management strategy. From there, we go directly into the inventory component of it. And this is where we start to collect specific data associated to what's inside our facility. So this is our facility. When we want to add a new asset type, this is the form that pops up. Again, this form has been designed based on international standards. So if we, as an example, within this facility, we want to collect the data in the ammonia room, we identify where that room is located, and then we start to drill down into the room, the components that are in that room. So as an example, we might have electrical equipment. That electrical equipment is made up of an electrical panel. Within that electrical panel, we have fuses, and the status of this piece of equipment is active. We also allow you to capture the condition of that asset. Again, based on 5 standards, we identify the condition of that asset. If this piece of equipment was consuming energy from the perspective of carbon emissions and so on, we would put a checkbox there. If this was a piece of equipment that we were renting and we were using it to generate revenue, put a checkbox there, and then these checkboxes automatically tell the system what to do. With this having been collected, we hit the Save button, and that information now appears across here. There's all kinds of neat functionality, such as sorting and searching, reorganizing, identifying what you're interested in. Those are more from a technology perspective. But from an inventory perspective, this allows you to capture and structure your inventory in a predefined way while still giving you some flexibility. Once you've collected this data, the next general question is, well, what can I do with it and how do I share this data and so on? So what we've added is the ability to hit the export button, and that export button will create an Excel file. This will just take a moment for it to pop up. There's the Excel file. So now you could take this file and you could optimize it whichever way you want it, delete, add, customize information, and so on, which means you have the entire freedom to do as you wish with the data. The value, again, is in collecting that inventory in a structured and in a processed way. Any questions or comments from anybody with regards to the first component that we spoke about? Okay, since there's no question, we'll just proceed. So now that we've collected the inventory, the next logical aspect is, what are the condition of that asset? And so this same information here, of which there's approximately 176 records, when we move into the condition side of it, it takes those same records, and what it does is it gives us the ability now to drill in more deeply into any one of those assets. I'm not going to bore you with the same functionality that I've shown you before, but just to highlight some key components here. So for this electrical panel, if we click on the edit button, there's the form. So now within that panel, we can input information such as make, model, serial number, the quantity. But there's a couple of other interesting components. When we talk about asset management, some key dates are, when did we purchase or install that piece of equipment? When does the warranty expire on that piece of equipment? What is the useful life of that equipment? What quantity do we have? What's the purchase price on that quantity? And in the eventuality that this piece of equipment is no longer being used, we change the value from active to not in use, and that will automatically give us the date that that piece of equipment was decommissioned. So this will keep the entire life cycle of that asset in one location and give you the ability to track and manage the assets. One of the key values or components to this is the ability to use this information in a meaningful way. And so we've created a report. This report will connect to all that financial data that we've inputted and give me an output that I need. So as an example, we're going back to our community center. We're going to go into the ammonia room. We're going to create the data in a PDF format, and we're going to submit the request. So now what we have here is all of that information of all of the assets inside that particular room. So there's the ammonia room. And now it breaks it down into a component by component. So this is, for example, emergency power. We've got a number of compressors, when they were installed, the useful life of that compressor, the current condition, the cost for which we paid or purchased that piece of equipment, the current value based on what life is left, how much money we have funded, and what the unfunded liability is associated to that. So what you are able to do is go into the system. This is just a quick recap of that inventory component. Go into the system, identify the asset that you have, the high-level information. If you want to display the location of your assets with Google Maps, so we want to look at where all the buildings are, we want to look at where inspections have been done. The ability to attach photos. So we have engineering drawings, we have as-built drawings, we have technical document specifications. The inventory, collecting the inventory, and within each one of these inventories, the ability to attach documents to it, the ability to view where that particular piece of equipment is located on the map. And later on, we'll talk about work orders and inspection. This information then allows me to start to collect the current condition rating of those assets, and that information then is generated through a report. What we have shown you to now is functionality that's available to each and every one of you as a member of the Recreation Association free of charge. So the association has seen the value of bringing tools to its members and helping them move forward with managing their assets. And so this is the component that is available as part of your membership into the association. Any questions or comments with regards to the inventory aspect of it? Okay, no questions being asked. We'll move on to the next. So as part of asset management, there are a number of components that are needed and required. So the first component is the inventory, which is what we've shown you. The next one is all about the maintenance of that piece of equipment. So we're talking about routine inspections and how you're able to create those inspections, manage those inspections with regards to any of the assets that you own. So let's talk a little bit about those inspections. Within the application, we have an inspection tab. We'll show you how the administrator creates the inspections. These are all the assets that we own. The inspections can be assigned to a particular user or a group of users. But from a management perspective, this is how you create the inspections. We identified the asset category. So for example, all of our buildings, all of our hockey arenas, all of our open spaces, all of our swimming pools. And so by identifying the asset category, we then identify all the unique assets that are in that category. So we might have 10 different parks, but in every park we have a swing and we've got bathrooms and we've got lights and we've got tennis courts and so on. So bottom line, as the administrator, you simply type in the word that you're looking for as your asset. You then define what are the typical types of inspections that you want to do. We want to check for the pressure. We want to check that it's an open contact. We want to check to replace the filters. We want to change the oil. We want to wash the floor. We want to wash the rooms. Again, these are just simply words that you type in. Once this is done, and it literally will take you 2 to 3 minutes to fill this in, now we start to create the actual inspection. So here's how it's done. We click on Create Inspection. We give it a name. We identify to what staff member we want to assign this inspection, how often we want this inspection to be done, when we want the inspection to start. And these are all the unique assets that we have for our buildings. But I only want to create one inspection, which is to review my compressor. So you click on the asset, you click on what is it that you want to do? Well, we want to just clean the compressor. When you hit the save button, what will happen is this inspection will automatically be assigned to this individual. It will be created once a month, starting on this day, and this individual will receive an email notification to go and check compressor and make sure that it's clean. Now, within this, there's three options: the ability to simply pass and fail the inspection, the ability to put a value. So the inspection was 65 PSI and it passed, or just type in a value, 53. This is the kind of information that the user will see. From a management perspective, we can look at all the inspections that have been created. We can turn them on, turn them off. We have summer inspections, we have winter inspections, we have inspections that maybe we don't do anymore, but they're all within the system. They're all there for historical purposes. Email notification. This is where we can assign an inspection to multiple users, and they each will receive an email letting them know that the inspection has been created. So once the administrator goes and sets this up, now you come in and the user that logs in, this is the page that they see. Now, why is this important from both an asset management perspective as well as from a liability perspective? It's important because from an asset management, you want to ensure that what they call life cycle events are being adhered to and are being done. From a liability perspective, we have a number of insurance companies that have approached us about supporting and helping their clients use this kind of an application to keep track of the fact that, yes, they are inspecting the playground. Or if something unforeseeable happens, there is information that validates that the town or the city or the organization was diligent in maintaining that equipment and was doing it in a proper way. From an end user perspective, when your staff logs in, we can define which staff member sees what inspections, but this is what they will typically see. And so from here, if an inspection has passed or failed or needs to be done, that information is here. So if we want to look at all the failed inspections, these are all the failed inspections that we need to look at. If we want to look at what failed in that inspection, we'll touch on that in a second, but we can take photos and pictures of that inspection. We can look at the history of that inspection. So as an example, the same individual went out 3 times during the course of a day to finish and fix that work. That's in the history section. And then these are your ability to sort and search by a particular user, a particular date, a particular time, so that you can narrow in exactly the inspection that you're looking for. If we want to look at why did this particular inspection fail, we click on the inspect button. This is the inspection that we created. These are the aspects that we want to check. The fact that there was no crack, the doorknob passed, but there was graffiti on the wall, so we didn't clean it, so it's left as a fail. The moment that we change that to a pass, this entire inspection then changes its status. We can look at the photos, if there were photos that were attached to that inspection, if there were notes that were taken. So I went there and I found no problem, or we went there and we noticed that we need to call in a plumber. If you want to take this inspection and save it as a PDF format, there it is. So now you can generate a hard copy and give it to your staff to do. If you want to associate a work order to that inspection, we'll touch on that in a moment. If your staff is doing inspections with iPads or other electronic devices, we can capture the location of where that individual was when that inspection was done. And if we want to look at the history of how many times did someone went out to look at that piece of equipment and what did they do every time they went out, all that information is available. So again, from the inspection, from an administration perspective, you create them. From an end user perspective, they're able to see the work that's been assigned to them. You're able to track the work. You're able to have a history of validation that the inspections have been done from a liability perspective. From an asset management perspective, you now have life cycle events that you have a history about what was done and how it was done. As well, on the inspection section, we have the ability to connect it to a map. Again, without requiring any sort of third-party GIS or requiring customization and so on, what we do is we connect to Google Maps. And when the inspections were done, because it was done on an iPad, we can go into and look at what inspections have passed, which inspections have failed. We can sort and search by a particular user and to look at what inspections, for example, have failed. Again, from an asset management perspective, one of the key criteria is having citizens' involvement. So if you're the manager and you get a phone call and somebody says, hey, I called in and nobody's dealt with the graffiti or nobody's cut the grass or where's the people that are supposed to be here, right away you can see, oh yeah, we sent somebody out there and this inspection has failed. And the reason that it failed is because X hasn't happened. If there's a desire, we can show you specific inspections with regards to ice resurfacers or for parks and things like that. Is there an interest in that, or are there any questions with regards to the inspection component of it?
Yeah, actually, I was just kind of wondering, so for any excess parts that we have, like extra compressors, everything like that, is there a spot that we can list like when it was purchased, but it's not installed?
Yeah, so, and I'm glad you're asking the questions, because what it does is it gives us some interaction here. So what ends up happening is, although you haven't physically installed it, for example, those would be either in a facility or in a warehouse or wherever the location may be. And so you could put that inventory in that location. When we come to the inventory and we click on the add button, so we can input an inventory without necessarily inputting installation or any of the dates. And only once you physically install it, you would come back into that inventory, click the edit button, and put the replacement date in there, just as an example. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, sure did.
Awesome. Any other questions with regards to the inventory or the inspection section? Okay, having said that, we'll move on. So what we've touched on is we've touched on the inventory, we've touched on the inspection aspect of it. The next thing that I'd like to do is touch on the work order side of it. Now, this is kind of an interesting one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log off. I'm going to log on to another site so that I can show you some actual live data and that you can actually see how it all works. There's always a challenge when you're doing a presentation live, so we're going to hope that everything works properly. So we're going to log in. We're going to log in as another potential customer. We're going to go to the site. I'm not going to bore you with talking about the inventory, the inspection, and so on. We've done that. But on the work order side, so what we have is we have a module specifically for work orders that need to be done. The difference between a work order and an inspection is reoccurring. Every 2 weeks, every week, once a month, we want to do this. The work order is when we find deficiencies and we need to deal with those deficiencies. So in this particular case, this is the work order module aspect of it. This is the administrator dashboard. So I can come in here and I can select all my staff and I can see how many work orders are in process, hold, closed, and so on. I can come in here year over year and I can look at how many work orders are created on a monthly basis. If I want to look at my worst facilities and why that's my worst facility, these are the work order types and the quantity that we've had to do on a year-by-year basis. From an asset management perspective, this information is critical because one of the key components is level of service. And so you need to be able to say, we are establishing that, we want to maintain our assets in a good working condition. When a request comes in, we want to address that request within a matter of a day, a week, 2 weeks. So this allows you to gather all of that information. What you see here is the management board, the dashboard. To create an actual work order case, we're actually able to link directly back to your assets. So the Google map, if I only want to drag and drop it, it populates the location of where this work order is being generated. If it's a phone call that comes in from a citizen or a user, we can type that information in here. This information would be automatically populated for you. So let me show you. Without you typing anything, the system would automatically know that that's the location. This is what the asset that it's located to, the park that we have, the deficiency that we found, the priority. That would automatically be populated. We can assign this to both internal staff as well as external consultants. We can assign it to the individual within that consulting company or within our various departments. We can take photos and pictures, put a description, and when we hit the generate button, this service request automatically becomes a work order. So now with the work orders, I can sort, I can search, I can assign work orders, I can print them, I can attach photos to them, I can narrow it down to, between certain period of date and time and so on. I'm not going to bore you and go through that, but that's the functionality that is there. I can actually assign this to an external contractor that they log into the system. They only see the work orders assigned to them. They read the information. They cannot make changes to any of the information. They can put comments in. We can add comments, but that's the only component that the contractor is able to input. But yet they can go through this entire process, do the work, and then simply close off that the work has been done. So that's the work order stuff. And again, a lot of these components that I'm showing you are consistent with asset management and the work orders associated to it. We can look at the history of, how many times did we call somebody out to work on that particular refrigeration plant? So that's another feature. We can look at where all these requests coming from. So if I come here and I go to all my work orders and I want to look at 2018, this is the territory that we cover. We've got, facilities in a variety of locations. These red work orders mean that they've been closed. These green ones mean that they're still being worked on. Again, we can zoom in and we can do that. The other component that is really, really useful for both day-to-day operations and from an asset management perspective is the level of service that you're providing and the reporting mechanism. So let's talk a little bit about that. When we click on reports, I'm going to show you one general report, but I think this will really sort of resonate with a lot of you folks. So I want to do an inventory on a yearly basis of how much effort, how much work has been done. Whether this is to justify expenses, whether it is to validate the amount of efficiency and work, that's entirely up to the customer. But I'm going to go back to 2016. So this customer began using the system the last 3 to 4 months in 2016. This is my staff, total number of work orders. These are my assets, buildings, senior center, trails, parks, total number of work orders. And these are the work orders that were created. So we had broken doors, we had HVAC issues, we had plumbing issues, and we had one broken appliance. Now, from an asset management perspective, this is all about managing level of staff, resources, and the funds associated to it. So let's look at the trends on a year-by-year basis. 2017, the first full year, 546, 409. Again, a variety of deficiencies, but our appliances almost matched the highest level of service requests. 2018, the number of work order keeps increasing. Buildings are giving us the biggest problem, but all of a sudden we're able to identify that appliances has now become the largest consumption of time and resources. So now we have an option of going back to council or going back to our board and saying, look, here's how many requests come in, here's the buildings, and my staff is now, inundated. It takes us 2 days to fix each one of these broken appliances. We either replace them or we fix them or we hire more staff. Decision gets made. Based on that decision, we go to 2019, and all of a sudden, our number of work orders has decreased, and our service calls for appliances has decreased by almost half. So that's the work order component of the RFAM solution. Questions or comments about that? Okay, as there are no questions, we'll move along. So one of the things that I want to do is, let's come back to here. Within your inventory, you have the ability to create work orders directly to that particular piece of equipment. So not only can you create separate work orders by clicking on the work order button, but you can actually come in. And so if I was to clear this and click on, I want to view anything that has work orders, here it is. If I want to see what work order was associated to this roof, the system will go out, it will link me to that particular piece of equipment and show me the work orders that have been created. So again, from an asset management perspective, I can now validate and show that we're doing all of our inspections, but I can also validate that we're maintaining it to the best of our ability. And here's all that historical information. If I want to print a work order out, in this case, there's work orders at the beginning of the week. I aggregate the ones that I want. I go in and I save them as a PDF. I hit the PDF button, and there's a sample of a work order that would be generated that I could give to my staff and have them go out and do that inspection or do that work order. So we've touched on the inventory, we've touched on the inspection, we've touched on the work orders. There's a couple of key components that I also want to touch on, which is the smart forecast. So when we talk about asset management, there's the wish list of, wouldn't it be great if we could do inspections every week and maintain all of our equipment and buy new equipment every time something broke? The reality is that finance always comes in. And so, how do we bring these three pieces together? So one of the things that we've done is in Ontario, we work with the Ontario Municipal Financial Officers Association. And through their input, we came up with this module called Smart Forecast. So we have our inventory, we have our work orders, we have our inspection. How do we put all this together? What the Smart Forecast will allow you to do is to consolidate all that information and give you access to it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to clear everything out of here. These are the same 188 assets that we own. Within our facility, though, of those 188 assets, we're only interested in those that are capital equipment. So we go in and we select our capital equipment. This is our capital equipment within the facility. We're looking at that equipment which is in poor condition. Again, this information is being drawn from the inventory page that we filled in. So we're looking for condition which is poor. Here it is. Now that we've got all of these poor pieces of equipment, we're interested in those who have a very high risk. There's the equipment that fills into that category. Now, why is this important? What do we do? What additional information do we have? What do we need to spend, and so on? When we click on the detail aspect of it, we have detailed information from the inventory page. When was it installed? What's the warranty? What's the useful life? How much did we pay for it? If we were to replace that, what's the replacement cost? And when would we replace it by? So that information is automatically copied over. Key components that our customers are asking us. When work is done on a piece of equipment, typically you might receive an email notification, an invoice, an electronic format, all kinds of different ways, of paper copies, some notes left over. It's important to collect that information, and it's really simple, right? What you do is you click on the add button, you fill in some very basic information like this invoice has been paid, when the invoice was issued, the company, the make, how much money was labor, parts, and professional fees, and so on. Take photos, attach it. And when you input that information, what it does is it aggregates it on a year-by-year basis, and it shows you the total amount of money that's been spent maintaining that piece of equipment. this is information that you already have. The challenge is, in most cases, it's not consolidated, it's not electronic. What we've done is we've automated that process. So now I can go year over year and I can see how much money we're spending on a yearly basis to maintain this piece of equipment. When you bring in contractors or when you have professional review of your assets, you can give them the ability to identify what they would consider the risk of that equipment. As you can see here, year over year, the risk changes based on the number of service calls, the number of repairs, what's the probability that this piece of equipment will fail, what's the consequence if it fails, what's the risk. And so just to show you how that information is derived, let's go to 2020 so it'll make some sense here. So in 2020, we've had 9 service calls, 4 repairs. The repairman is telling me that, hey, there's a very likelihood that this thing's gonna come to an end. And if it comes to an end, it's a severe problem. And so based on that, the risk that this thing will fail is high. When they hit the save button, it automatically changes that value for you. So now you have the cost to maintain that piece of equipment, the risk associated with that particular piece of equipment, and the financial aspect of it. So what this component will do is, if I come here, so what I want to look at is our financial situation over a 25-year plan from 2020 to 2045. And so what we're looking at is, here's how much money we're spending to maintain it. Here's how much money we've put in the budget for replacing it. And this number here is automatically populated. So in 2025, we're going to require $150,000. That information comes right from here, from the inventory page. And so now what we're able to do is work with the Treasury Department, work with council, work with staff, and the ability to really identify our capital equipment and what's the investment that's required to maintain that capital equipment. Questions or comments about this component of it? As there are no questions, we'll just proceed to a couple of other interesting components. With regards to asset management, going forward, carbon emission is a key component of that. And so if you remember at the beginning, when we go into the asset and we select a piece of equipment, we have the ability to identify, is that piece of equipment, does it consume energy or not? And when we put a checkbox there, that piece of equipment then is automatically listed in the energy section. So now this is something that we're starting to develop in partnership with a couple of different companies and so on. But what this is starting to do now is it's starting to give me an idea of, in my facility, what are the equipment that is consuming energy, to make the capacity, the power, the operating system, and so on. And our eventual goal is to integrate this into an energy management type of software and application. So that's something that we're working on moving forward. But all of this has to do with how efficiently are we maintaining our building. And there's lots of companies out there, when you buy a new heater, a new vacuum, whatever the case may be. They give you all kinds of electronic way of keeping track and visualizing the condition or the efficiency of that equipment, whether temperature's gone up or down and so on. So we've done something similar. If we go to the RFAM website and we go to the technology page, so these are wireless sensors. They don't require network connectivity of any sort from your perspective. You basically just put these little boxes anywhere you want in your facility. They communicate back to our server through a cellular network, and we're able to collect that information for you. So if we go to the efficiency section, this is our facility. These are various rooms. These are sensors that we've put into those rooms. I want to look at a particular room. This will show me the current condition, both from a temperature and a humidity perspective. So it's reading that information every 10 minutes, every half hour, depending on how it's set up. And then we can connect that directly to historical data. So if I want to go back and I want to look at our facility or that particular room, whether it's the dressing room, whether it's the hallway and so on, how efficiently are we maintaining that information? That information, let me just go back a little bit more over here. So you can see here on a monthly basis, it's giving me the average temperature, average humidity, and then it's graphically displaying that for me so that I can see, are those rooms being optimized? And some of our current customers have really found this beneficial in the example of, in a hockey rink, they've put these sensors on top of the door sill between the hockey rink and the hallway. And so they're able to monitor the temperature, the humidity in those rooms, see if there's changes that have to be done or tweaks that they have to make. And so that's the component with regards to the efficiency. The last thing is we are working and we have a warehouse module. The warehouse module was built with the understanding that if you own a number of facilities, if you have multiple people buying consumable items, whether it's gloves, whether it's PPE devices, whatever the case may be, we want to start to keep track of that. And so it's in a preliminary infancy stage, but what it allows you to do is it allows you to create your inventory, manage the inventory for, how many different gloves do we have, or what's the minimum quantity of gloves that we want to keep on hand and so on. And that's the information that the warehouse component offers you. So, it's been 45 minutes, almost an hour of me chatting. We've tried to give you a good overview of not only the RFAM application as it stands on its own, but the value of you as a member of Recreation Manitoba being able to take advantage of the free inventory portion. If you see the value in these other modules, they are available for a nominal monthly fee. But again, that's compared to the functionality that you get versus the cost. We've been told by a number of associations as well as users that the RFAM is unique in not only its functionality, but also in its affordability. And so having said that, I'd like to thank you for your time. Happy to answer any questions if there are any. Otherwise, thank you, and I look forward to working together in the future, hopefully.
How would we find out more costs on this programming?
So if you reach out to your association, they will put you in touch with our sales team here within Marmac.
Okay,
The gentleman here is Zachary, and he would be the individual that would sort of be happy to set you up and so on. Again, to set you up in the system to begin with and to evaluate the inventory and so on, that's at no cost. All we need is an email saying, please set us up. Our intent and our goal is to work with the association to provide them access and input, and also to share with the users the successes that we're encountering.
okay.
MJ, do you want to sort of take over?
Yep. Thank you very much, John, for providing an overview of the platform and diving deeper into that. I found that very interesting. I think it sort of helped clear up what each of the modules could do, and having sort of that hands-on practical experience is very useful for us. So thank you very much for making the time. If anyone interested in the free inventory module or finding out the price for all the other add-on modules, please send us an email at info@recreationnb.ca. This session is going to be available before the end of the week for you to review, in case you need to show it to supervisors or anybody to sort of help them understand what the platform is about. We'll also send an email after this just to follow up with everybody, and that way you know exactly who to email if you want to get your free module set up. If nobody has any other questions, I will wish you a wonderful rest of the day and enjoy your week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.